Before controlling the resources, I decided to um, continue our sessions on monitoring sessions about monitoring the stakeholder engagement, and then I'll cover monitoring the patients. Stakeholder engagement is not a static process. It evolves throughout the project life cycle. Monitoring the engagement of these stakeholders ensures that the key stakeholders remain involved. Expectations are managed and necessary adjustments are made. Without continuous engaging, tracking the projects may suffer from misalignment, leading sometimes to scope changes, delays, or stakeholder dissatisfaction. As we all know that the stakeholders play a critical role in any project success. So monitoring these engagement, ensuring that the stakeholder remains involved and aligned. As per PMI monitoring the stakeholder engagement process, it focuses on tracking the stakeholder interaction and making necessary adjustments. And to start with the key ITTOs, here we have for monitoring the stakeholder engagement. So monitoring stakeholder follows the PMI structured ITTA framework. Input such the stakeholder engagement plan, which guides the process. Also, you can think it's part of the project management plan. While tools like the stakeholder analysis and decision-making techniques, it help assessing the engagement levels. And the outputs here may include the updated plans or change requests to enhance the communication strategies. So these inputs are well known to all of us. Performance data, in case that you have find any issue that let's say that you need to fix at your work performance data. The EFFs and the OPAs are well known to us. Project management plan, we already talked about it, which is the stakeholder engagement plan, which is part of the project management plan. Tools and techniques here we have explained already: data analysis, decision making, data presentation, communication skills is a new thing here that we are gonna cover. We are gonna let's say emphasize the importance of having a well let's say defined communication plans to be let's say targeted based on the stakeholders' preferences and needs. The outputs here would be here again the work performance information, change requests in case if any let's say communication plans or engagement strategy need to be changed. So you have to apply for change request here. Then the project management plan updates if any project document updates. Now let's talk about tracking the stakeholder engagement effectiveness. So stakeholder engagement effectiveness can be measured using key metrics such as the attendance rate, sentiment analysis, and response times. If the engagement between you and the stakeholder declines, corrective action should be taken to reinforce the stakeholder involvement and maintain the alignment with the project goals. And to assess, for example, some of these engagement metrics, like if you conduct a stakeholder satisfaction survey, understand whether your stakeholder are, let's say, satisfied about your project and your communication, let's say, also meeting attendance, as I mentioned, and participation rates. What else we have? We have the feedback and the response time. And the next tool here we have is the sentiment analysis by using a qualitative and quantitative method to assess the stakeholder sentiments. Third tool here, which is also considered as an important tool that can be used to, let's say, to track the stakeholder engagement effectiveness, is the the effectiveness. And by evaluating if the stakeholder understands and support the project goals. About identifying changes in, let's say, stakeholder influence or expectation. Have you noticed when you are running a project that one of your stakeholders were having a high influence and high impact, and they were communicating, let's say, with the project continuously, and then suddenly the stakeholder stopped communicating, or maybe he has lost his interest as power and grid interest, let's say, tool that you have assessed. So, have you think why the stakeholder has changed in his influence or expectation? So, stakeholder influence and expectations are not fixed. They can change due to external factors like market conditions, regulations, or organizational priorities. By using stakeholder mapping tools and continuous feedback loops, the project managers can adapt engagement strategies to align with these shifts. So again, these tools that you can utilize to understand the stakeholder, let's say, power, or interest, or let's say impact on the project. We have this tool which we already have covered by when we were talking about the communication and stakeholder engagement, which is the power interest grid, which identifies the key stakeholders with their high influence and low influence, also with their influence and interest within the project. The next tool here we have is change impact assessment. And you can use this assessment to evaluate the shifts in stakeholder expectations. Finally, you can utilize the feedback loop to have continuous feedback mechanism to detect any evolving concerns that you need to take care of. Let's take an example here, whereas an IT project where discovered that one of these regulatory stakeholders had increased their influence due to a new compliance laws. By proactively addressing their concerns, the team has avoided costly rework. How important to adjust your engagement strategies based on the feedback? So, feedback driven adjustment are crucial for maintaining strong stakeholder relationships. Using adaptive communication, customized reporting, and escalation mechanisms, it ensures that the stakeholder remains informed, engaged, and supportive of the project goals. So, the key tools here to keep your, let's say, engagement strategies aligned and adapt a new, let's say engagement strategies to align with the stakeholder shifts. So these tools including the adaptive communication plans by tailoring the communication style to stakeholder needs. So sometimes you might deal with technical stakeholder where you have to talk in depth about these technical concepts, while you might have a non-technical stakeholder or a business stakeholder who has no idea about all of these, let's say, complex technical concepts. So you need to tailor your communication to meet the stakeholder needs. Next, we have the escalation procedures. So escalation procedures by or setting an escalation procedures by addressing the unresolved stakeholder issues efficiently. Finally, we have here a customized reporting, and by providing a relevant data to different stakeholder groups. So each of these stakeholders might be interested in, let's say, in a certain part within your project. So you need to customize your reporting to let's say, to address each of these stakeholder groups' needs. Stakeholder communication channels and best practices. So effective stakeholder engagement relies on selecting the right communication channels, also selecting the right data or the right type of information that you're gonna share with these stakeholders. So, two-way communication and stakeholder-specific engagement plans are a balance between the formal and informal interaction help you as a project manager to ensure the clarity and alignment. So again, if you recall when we were talking about these communication plans, we have explained what are these formal and informal communication, and we talked and emphasized the importance of choosing the right communication methods based on the stakeholder needs. Also, in case if there is any stakeholder specific engagement plan, so expect that not all of these stakeholders require the same level of involvement. And if you recall when we were talking about the engagement level and the interest level and the power interest grid. So based on these, let's say, analysis and based all of these classification of these stakeholders, you need to have, let's say, different level of involvement, but almost or always it's better to have, let's say, high supportive stakeholders to support you throughout the project life cycle. Third tool here we have is two-way communication or two-way, let's say, communication concept. It works by encouraging the feedback rather than just one-way status update. It's like after you send, let's say, a report or a message to the stakeholders, you might confirm with the stakeholder if your message were clear enough or else they need some more information to, let's say, to clarify about one of these concepts or one of these updates or reports or any information about the project. So this is how you enhance the two-way communication. When it comes to addressing these challenges, like such as the resistant uh, to stakeholder engagement. So stakeholder resistance can stem from uncertainty or miscommunication or sometimes competing interests and priorities. Addressing these issues through a clear role definitions and personalized engagement and training can improve the participation and overall project success. So, to understand these common causes of resistance, where you might face it with one of these stakeholders, first we talked about lack of interest. If your stakeholder has no interest at or benefit of running your project or monitoring your project closely, so that is called lack of interest. So you need to look into these ways of, let's say, engagement that could, let's say, cause a better interest of of the project by maybe talking about the benefits of that project to these stakeholders, so their interest will increase by the time. Also, competing priorities or misunderstanding, which is one of these main reasons where the stakeholders might have misunderstanding of the project goals and they think might this project will replace them or replace their team roles or whatever. So it's your job as a project manager to ensure that the stakeholders have a full clarity about, let's say, let's say the project goals, the priorities of that goal, the implementation plans, how it could benefit them after it get implemented. The next tool we have here is the concept we have here is the mitigation strategies. And mitigation strategies like personalized outreach, such as role clarification and incentivizing sometimes by participation. So you look into these ways where you encourage stakeholder engagement to motivate them to keep them aligned with your project goals. Finally, we have the stakeholder training, and by educating the stakeholders on the project benefits and showing them how will the project help them to enhance their, for example, their operation efficiency or to increase their, um, let's say, profits or whatever goal the project was supposed to do. So it's important to keep these stakeholders trained and educated about the project benefits. Let's look here an example where there is a digital transformation project. It has faced a resistance from the employees. Again, this is a very important example where we have a digital transformation project where it has faced some resistance from the employees, fearing job displacement. And by conducting training sessions on how the new system would help the team, not to replace them, engagement improved significantly. So this is an example where there is, let's say, a resistance due misunderstanding of the, let's say, of the system or the project benefits. So in our case, the employees were fearing that they will be replaced by this digital transformation or system that were and the project was about to build. So by educating these employees, we made them understand that these, let's say, or this system or this transformation project isn't for replacing them, but however, it's there to support them and help them and to enhance their operational efficiency and productivity. And here are some of these common challenges when doing stakeholder monitoring. So challenges in stakeholder monitoring includes the stakeholder turnover, or sometimes you might face a conflicting interests and unclear expectations. Proactive knowledge management and continuous engagement help to mitigate these risks and to understand each of them in more in depth, like when we talked about stakeholder turnover. And turnover here means changes in the key decision makers, which can disrupt the engagement. So now you have to, Tyler, now you have to understand what are the new communication, say, preferences of the new stakeholders or the new decision makers. So it might sometimes create a disrupt and the engagement process. The conflicting interests, and we have talked many times about conflicting interests. As we mentioned many times, that different stakeholders have different priorities, which can create, let's say, alignment challenges or misalignment. So it's very important to understand each of these stakeholder interests and align the project goals with their interests and with their benefits to their teams. The third challenge here we have is unclear expectations. An unclear expectation like miscommunication, which can be one of these root causes of unclear expectation. And one of these root causes where the stakeholders have no clear expectation is miscommunication, which can lead to project misalignment. So it's very important to keep the stakeholder aligned with the project goals, and it's very important to to establish, let's say, a clear vision, a clear mission, or a clear goals to these stakeholders and make a realistic expectations from the start to avoid all of these miscommunication or misalignment later within your project. To talk about the continuous improvement in stakeholder engagement, stakeholder engagement should evolve based on the past experiences, also the lessons learned and feedback reviews. So it's not, again, it's not a static, let's say, engagement plan. It's a dynamic where it evolves with the time based on the, let's say, with the stakeholder preferences, the past experiences, again, the lessons learned from the previous project, feedback reviews. Also, benchmarking that can be used against the best practices, contributing to ongoing improvement in engagement strategies. So the key, let's say, tools here you can utilize is the lessons learned from the previous, let's say, projects by capturing the engagement best practices. Also, the stakeholder feedback reviews by regularly evaluating and improving the engagement strategies. Finally, we talked about benchmarking best practices by comparing against the industry standard. And to summarize our important session on stakeholder engagement monitoring as one of its key processes of controlling and monitoring the process group, we say that monitoring the stakeholder engagement is an ongoing process that requires proactive tracking, data driven decision making, and tailored communication. A successful engagement ensures that the stakeholder alignment and project success. We talked about also about the importance of having continuous monitoring to monitor the engagement level throughout the project life cycle, um, and always tailoring your communication to be stakeholder centric communication, which aligns the communication methods with the stakeholder needs.